We're in the midst of this ongoing conflagration, whether it's real or not, with the United States and President Donald Trump, where Canadians are now taking to what they consider nationalistic fervor. We saw it in the recent Four Nations NHL tournament, which was great hockey, and I was tremendously pleased to see Canada win. In all truthfulness, like a lot of hockey folks, didn't think they would. I thought the Americans had goaltending on their side, and the Canadian goalie played the game of his life, and the Americans let Connor McDavid free in overtime, and their fate was sealed. So bravo, Canada. We win at hockey. I wish the same could be said for our juniors. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there. But in the course of the tournament in Montreal, where our usual celebration is to simply burn the city down when we win the cup, and that hasn't happened in oh so long, they decided that they would boo the national anthem. And that got the Americans going. And when we played in Boston, they likewise booed the Canadian anthem. And one of our Canadian artists, so called, who was earmarked to sing the anthem, decided to take latitude and sang the anthem in her own very special way, which I'm sure bothered our American friends. But we have to ask: is this Canadian nationalism? Is in how are we responding to what we think Donald Trump's worldview is? So let's start with that. Nobody knows what Donald Trump's worldview is because it might change from day to day. But if you step back and say, what is this man's standard operating theory? It's one of chaos. I said in my last little rant that he's not emulating Ronald Reagan by any means. There's no paper bag lunches with Tip O'Neill or reaching across the aisle. He is born of the New York real estate market, where being tough and dealing with folks that you probably don't really want to meet is the order of the day. So Donald Trump's, opening is always going to be the most. He always is going to open high. He also believes in chaos theory. He keeps the other side off its feet. And he will, with his media friends, absolutely flood the market, the market of public opinion, with their opinion, and it's working. Canadians are back on their heels and wondering if we are at an existential moment. But we have to step back again and say, okay, why is he saying these things? And then when we can cut through that, possibly we have a negotiation position. So what's Donald Trump's worldview? Well, Donald Trump's worldview is certainly to make America great again. We all know that. But it's also to make money. It's to address balance of payments issues and trade deficits and all that kind of stuff. And he sees an effective way of doing that through a tariff policy. He also looks at not wanting to relinquish the fiat currency position for the US dollar, but he wouldn't mind seeing a reduction in that dollar because, as we in Canada know, it's an artificial subsidy. Canadian policy has, for the most part, been to maintain a low dollar. Ostensibly, it's supposed to be good for our economy, although we sort of have squandered that possibility. So Donald Trump believes that you can make money in a post-war environment better than you can in a war environment. Hence, he has a number of initiatives to end conflict across the world. Certainly, the Abraham Accords from his last run in office are testament with what he can do. But now we see it in Ukraine, where certainly he's trying to obtain mineral rights in and from Ukraine, but the result should be the end of that war. And it's been World War I like, folks. There's probably 1 million people that have been slaughtered on both sides over the vast Ukrainian steppe. And anyone who reads military history will know that there are no natural barriers, and the only guarantee is more casualties. So he abhors war, and doesn't abhor the use of force, but certainly sees better potential for his own country in a world which is in a post-war environment. He also sees on his borders threats. Now, we in Canada might not take this seriously because, unfortunately, we are fed the pablum of corporate media and the CBC, which is, the organ of the Liberal Party of Canada. And but Trump sees a threat, not only, fentanyl, which is real. Admittedly, nothing close to what's coming in from Mexico, but to deny that it's not there is ridiculous. And he sees growing Chinese influence in Canada. We've sold several companies and resources to the Chinese, and maybe that's in our best interest, but it's certainly not seen favorably by the Americans. And then look south of the border, where in addition to an open border, you have active participation of the Mexican government with China, and further south you see the port facilities at either end of the Panama Canal owned by Chinese interests. So Trump certainly sees things I guess more like Monroe. He sees a threat hemispherically to the United States, and he is reacting accordingly. So perhaps we as Canadians might want to open a book or not listen to the CBC and understand perhaps why Donald Trump is saying what he is saying. Now, when we get into our current state of Canadian nationalism, which is, in my opinion, ginned up by the Liberal Party of Canada to stave off their electoral annihilation. And don't believe the polls, folks. This party is not acting like a party that thinks it's going to win. They have no star candidates that have been attracted. A good chunk of their caucus and most of their cabinet is not running for office again. There may be a temporary manufactured bump in the polls for the coronation, and it is the coronation of Mr. Carney in this very choreographed leadership. The expulsion of Ruby Dahlia recently is proof positive that the Liberals have a plan here. It's an orchestrated leadership to the fullest. Now, is this Canadian nationalism? The booing of anthems, the destruction or the rewriting of our own anthem to drum up some false narrative. Booing Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky is a dual citizen. His daughter is married to a prominent American golfer. He's friends with Donald Trump. He is also, not arguably, the greatest hockey player that this country has ever produced. And if Edmonton wants to rename a street, like Toronto wants to do away with the names of schools of other canceled great Canadians, well, that's just a mark on Edmonton. It's not a city that I've really ever enjoyed visiting. It's certainly not Calgary. But if we have to ask ourselves, is this us? Is this you know, shallow and rude expression against the Americans, our personification, or is this what this country is about? And folks, remember, the Americans will respond. Donald Trump, along with his friends in the media, and for instance, Fox News, which has more viewership than all other cable news networks put together, will put out a narrative on Canada, and it won't be what we want. It won't be the helping hand that Doug Ford is trying to portray. It will be this dark nationalism, booing the anthem. They will go on about Canada's ridiculous woke policies, which are not by any means shared by the vast number of the Canadian population, but are foisted upon us by this liberal kleptocracy. So we have to ask ourselves: is this what we want to be portraying? Is this Canada? I don't believe for a second that it is. And I'm a historian. I'm in addition to a lawyer, but carry a few degrees in history, and I've read a lot of Canadian history. And no, it's not boring. It's in the context a story of success, of compromise, as I said earlier, between two founding peoples, an accommodating, welcoming people that have built something tremendously special, a powerful economy, a G7 economy, a national brand that other nations have respected. And I think about it in a series of dates. We think about 1867, where in the face of potential American expansion at that point, because we had, I believe, President Grant in charge of the largest land army in the world at the time. Remember, the North had just defeated the South, and it would have been simple for him to march north in about 2 weeks, absorb Canada into the United States. But two critical politicians, John A. Macdonald and George Etienne Cartier, founded this great country with the help of the other fathers of Confederation and hammered out an imperfect document, but they were able to put something together that has lasted till today. Now, I think our Constitution needs a redress. It needs a redo. It needs to include property rights. It has to get rid of affirmative action in the Charter of Rights. It's a document that was written for the 1980s, and I think has allowed the judiciary to assume far too prominent a role in the life of Canada. But 1867 is important. 1917, April 1917, where for the first time Canada fought it as a nation and took the inhospitable ground of Vimy Ridge that no other Allied army could. Why we can't have a national holiday called Vimy Day is beyond me. 1941, a story of courage and heroism in defeat, where the Canadians valiantly defended Hong Kong against a Japanese onslaught, held out and yet surrendered. And some of them suffered horrendously in captivity, but we held our chins high. 1944, where Canada, the first Canadian Army, went ashore at Juno Beach along with the British on either flank, and soon after took Falaise, the critical linchpin in the Normandy campaign. 1972, the golden goal of Paul Henderson, where we, behind to the Soviets, came back and again showed our great prowess in hockey. 1979, Ambassador Ken Taylor spiriting Americans out of Tehran when the theocracy decided that it would hold American hostages for over 400 days. 1980, Terry Fox running across this country. 2006, Operation Medusa, where a Canadian regiment, two battalions, basically deployed on the sharp end, the pointed end of an offensive in Afghanistan. We punched above our weight class there, and we should hold our heads high because of that. Canada is a country of historical achievement, of quiet stoicism. We may not beat our chests, other than hockey, and maybe we should a little bit, but Canada has politely, stoically, doggedly, and without reservation punched above its weight class since 1867. Read the stories of World War I about the levels of mobilization that Canada enjoyed. We put forth an effort like no other country. World War II, we did it again. We've been doing it for years. And now, what have we become? What is Canada today in 2025? Well, Canada is nothing like it was in 1944, and I would argue it's nothing like it was 10 years ago. Our cities are full of crime. They're filthy. They're full of homeless people. Why? Because we have addicted our people to government. We have killed resilience. We have killed personal responsibility, or not we, the Liberal Party of Canada and those who support them in the media. Our healthcare is a joke. We sit there and say, oh, we have a superior healthcare system to the United States. We simply don't. If you have coverage in the United States, and they do have with Obamacare, they've expanded out the ability for people to access. We don't ration healthcare in the United States. We do in Canada. If you're of a certain age and have a certain condition, they will make your passing painless. You will not be cured. We have embraced medically assisted dying at a pace that is nothing more than a death cult. We've decided it's easier to discard people than to reach down and to help them with and bring them back up with the love of a prosperous and civilized society. Our schools are a mess. The Toronto District School Board wants to excise names from history that they simply don't agree with, without one scintilla of historical evidence. As I mentioned, crime is through the roof. We never had this problem. Immigration is an absolute joke. We have to politely ask several million people to go home. But it's not their fault. They came here of good intention, and most of them have worked hard. Those who have committed crimes need to leave, whether they want to or not. But a lot of folks have come and really worked their asses off. And what have the old stock Canadians done? They sit at home. They're addicted to government programs like ODSP. This has got to stop. We have to once again stand up and start working again. We have to start creating. We have to deploy capital. Our tax system has discouraged it, not only discouraged it, it's forced people to leave the country. And folks, they're not coming back. I'm a pompous ass. Look how I dress. I've got 4 degrees. My wife has 3. I'm the father of 3 young kids, 11, 10, and 9. And let me tell you, my greatest fear is not how far they'll go in school. They can go as far as they want. My fear, folks, is very simple, and I think a lot of you probably asked this question. When they finish school, what are their choices? They'll look to their future and say, well, what should I do? Well, Canada on its current path, they will have 2 choices: work for government or leave. That is the stark reality of Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney's Canada. And if you want to change it, If you want to take it back, and I use those words intentionally, folks, it's time to discover aspiration and a backbone. Canadians need to grow a set of balls and go back and make Canada great again. Thank you very much.